In 1929, something happened just down the street from where George Washington was sworn in as this country's first president. The street was Wall Street, where on October 29th, the booming American stock market suddenly crashed. It would impact the lives of every American.
Trouble hit me hard that last day in October. They told me I needed more cash. I couldn't get it. I was wiped out that day.
The crash led to the worst economic crisis in American history, as banks failed and factories closed down.
Oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis the song, the sigh of the weary.
It became known as the Great Depression, and by 1931, 12 million Americans were out of work. And then a massive drought in the West began turning the country's farmland into dust, spreading more suffering and poverty across America. What made the situation even worse was the fact that suffering Americans were getting little sympathy from the White House. Herbert Hoover, who believed in limited government, refused to intervene in the crisis.
I do not believe that the power and duty of the general government ought to be extended to the relief of individual suffering.
In 1932, Hoover stated publicly that no one in America was actually starving. But he was wrong. Almost 1 million Americans were living in cardboard shacks in shanty towns across the country, as the writer John Dos Passos described.
They sleep in little lean-tos built out of old newspapers, cardboard boxes, bits of tin or tar paper roofing, every kind of cockeyed makeshift shelter from the rain scraped together out of the city dump.
People called them Hoovervilles, blaming the president, who didn't seem to grasp the severity of the crisis.
I am convinced we have passed the worst, and with continued effort, we shall rapidly recover.
In the summer of 1932, thousands of World War I veterans and their families marched to Washington and camped in protest outside the Capitol. Congress had voted them a cash bonus for their war service, but the bonus was not due until 1945. They needed it now. They called themselves the Bonus Army, and they marched through the streets in peaceful protest. But instead of responding sympathetically, an unnerved Herbert Hoover asked the Army to intervene. In the grips of the Great Depression, the government turned against its own citizens.
It's war, the greatest concentration of fighting troops in Washington since 1865, to rout the Bonus Army from government property which they've been occupying without permission. The police cannot handle them, and so they're being forced out of their shacks by smoke bombs and tear gas hurled by the troops. The soldiers have orders to burn down the unsanitary and illegal camps.
By the time it was over, dozens of war veterans had been wounded, and 2 babies had died from tear gas. Americans everywhere felt they were getting a raw deal.